Erin Kelly, and I joined Pittsburgh Taiko when the group was started in 2009. One of Pittsburgh Taiko's first performances was at the Nationality Room's open house in 2009. We teamed up with a group from Bethany College in West Virginia to play at the open house concert, and that was actually the first time we got to play on real drums because we didn't have drums for a while.
My name is Ulu Mills. I have been a member of Pittsburgh Taiko since 2017 when I moved to Pittsburgh for grad school from Japan. I started playing Taiko when I was in Japan and wanted to stay connected to Japan somehow when I came for grad school, and Taiko in Pittsburgh was the first thing that I Googled when I arrived, and that's how I found Pittsburgh Taiko. I was really interested in Taiko from a very young age. I grew up in Hawaii, and we have lots of Japanese festivals and Okinawan festivals and local Taiko groups that I grew up watching. But I never really had the opportunity because up until recently I worked at night mostly. But when I moved to Japan and worked a 9-to-5 schedule, then it was much easier for me to get involved.
Hi, I'm Mizuki. I started playing Taiko when I was in high school. At the time, I really enjoyed playing Taiko, and I loved how energetic and dynamic Taiko is. After I graduated high school, I stopped playing Taiko for about a year. But after my first year at Pitt, I really missed playing Taiko, and I also wanted to meet more people with similar interests. So I went on internet and looked up Taiko Pittsburgh, and that's how I found out about Pittsburgh Taiko.
I've been with Pittsburgh Taiko for about 5 years. I first played Taiko as a music education major, and I immediately enjoyed the physicality of it. Several years later, as a teacher, I programmed a Taiko piece on a percussion ensemble concert, and the students loved it as well. I currently teach 2 high school Taiko clubs, Armstrong Taiko and Leechburg Taiko. Joining Pittsburgh Taiko has helped me to fill in some gaps and learn about the art form from a cultural perspective.
Taiko is a Japanese art, but it's become popular all over the world. In Japan, you'll hear Taiko in religious ceremonies, Shinto and Buddhist both, also in classical music and classical theater, and community festivals.
And as a Japanese language major, that was my big motivation for moving to Japan, but at the same time, I also wanted to continue learning these art forms. So I asked to be placed in Kansai so that I could go to Kyoto and attend traditional theater training. So alongside Taiko, I also did Kyogen and Nihonbuyo training as a continuation of what I was doing in college.
Since I am not Asian American and I don't have Japanese ethnic background, I really wanted to learn as much as I could about the history and the background of this music, so I could really help to represent it properly to the people that we perform for. This form of Taiko, where it's arranged as a group performance art, it was only invented in the 1950s. It was invented by a man called Daihachi Oguchi. But the form of Taiko that he invented, this group Taiko performance, it still uses rhythms and instruments and melodies from Japanese folk traditions. After I became involved with Pittsburgh Taiko, I wanted to learn more about the origins of this art. I was able to travel to Japan several times to learn more about Japanese music and art. Japanese summers are really, really hot and really humid, and they're not the greatest time to go to Japan if you like to be comfortable. But there are so many festivals in the summer, and you can travel around and hear different music and learn different dances and see the different traditions all over the country.
I see Pittsburgh Taiko as a place not only to play Taiko, but also to learn more about Japanese culture. Because I left Japan when I was 9 years old, there are many things about Japan and Japanese culture that I don't know much about, even though I probably should know as a Japanese person. So being part of Pittsburgh Taiko has been helping me fill in those gaps and learn more about the culture I'm originally from.
Pittsburgh Taiko is part of the Japan America Society of Pennsylvania. So we're part of their cultural outreach offerings, and we get to go to elementary schools and middle schools and sometimes high schools and do presentations about Taiko and about Taiko's role in Japanese culture. So we talk about, we perform because that's always fun. But we talk about the costumes we wear and the history of the hapi and hachimaki bands and the clothes that we wear. We talk about the traditional methods for building drums in Japan. We talk about the music itself, obviously, and the history of how it's used in Japan and in Japanese festivals.
Taiko has its own built-in language, right? Like the kuchishoga is how we learn songs, and it's very accessible. And so I always thought that was really nice when we would have school performances, when we would teach them the kuchishoga, and they could very quickly just start playing on their laps and pick up on the language of Taiko. I really enjoyed that.
We're also supported by the Asian Studies Center at the University of Pittsburgh. So we've been able to perform at their coming of age ceremony that they've done the last several years in January for the exchange students who are from Japan and will miss the coming of age ceremony. It's also open to Pitt students, and that means that one of our members actually participated in the ceremony this past year, so that was nice to see. In normal years, Pittsburgh Taiko does a variety of performances in the Pittsburgh area. We do concerts, we do corporate events. We've performed at student-run festivals at Carnegie Mellon and at University of Pittsburgh. We've performed also at the Squirrel Hill Lunar New Year celebration, which is always a really great time. So since these educational presentations have always been part of our mission, we have had to make sure that all our members are pretty up on Taiko history. Taiko started becoming more popular in North America in the 1960s and 1970s. Young Japanese Americans, mostly on the West Coast, wanted to reconnect with their roots and also wanted to form a more positive cultural identity for themselves. This was during the Vietnam War, and many of them were involved with the peace movement, anti-war movement, and other civil rights movements at the time. So they didn't have a lot of resources. They got together, they built their own drums, they formed their own groups, composed their own music, and people got to see them, and it became more and more popular.
I didn't even know that Taiko is a thing in America until I joined the group. And it has been really interesting to see how Japanese tradition is appreciated in countries outside of Japan, and how people in Taiko community in the US enjoy Taiko in their own ways while respecting the tradition.
Playing with Pittsburgh Taiko has also helped me to branch out and interact with members of other Taiko groups at conferences and workshops. These experiences are especially valuable because I can take what I learned at these events back to my students.
Taiko is a folk form, and I think that makes it more accessible in general, not just with the language, but with the music itself. And I think that's why it has caught on so globally, is that it feels like it could belong to anyone who tries it.